welcome to the April 13th, 2017 meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee. The school committee met at 6:30, from 6:30 to 7 in an executive session pursuant to Chapter 38, Section 21A. Discuss the reputation, character, complaints, or charges brought against a public officer. I now call the meeting to order at our regular public session at 7:12. And I would seek a motion regarding the minutes of March 23rd.
Move to approve the minutes from March 23rd.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Discussion. Mr. Duval.
It's noted that the minutes from the prior meeting were unanimous. I did not vote on that because I was not here at the prior meeting. So.
Okay. With that modifications, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Normally, our next item on the agenda is public comment, but with the support of the school committee, I'm going to actually put that fourth. We're going to do the student representatives, and the first one we have is Spotlight on Harwich Elementary School. I don't know if that's high school, so.
Hello, I am Dorothy Walsh, and I am in Mrs. Maycomber's 4th grade classroom. Harwich Elementary has had so many fun activities since January when the last kids came. One of the many things was MCAS. MCAS is a program on computers that you take in your classroom. For MCAS, you do ELA and math. So far, we took the ELA session. We are taking math after vacation. For MCAS, they have us answer some questions for ELA and math. MCAS is a little hard, but we have gotten used to it. Another thing that we did this year was High Five Friday. So on a Friday in March, police officers came and they almost gave all of the kids in the school high fives. I think that is cool because there's about 600 kids in our school. There is another fun thing that our school did. We had the Shamrock Shimmy in March. What the Shamrock Shimmy is kids come on a Saturday and dance to Irish music. We also danced to today's top hits music. There was a DJ, and he let us sing to the songs on a microphone. It was very fun, and a lot of people wore green. Thank you for letting me represent my grade and telling you about all the things that happened since January.
Thank you.
Good job.
Hi, my name is Jedediah Zimmerman, and I'm in Mrs. McManaman's classroom. In the last 3 months, we had a lot of new experiences at our school. In February, we earned a school-wide reward for filling the fish tank, and our reward was K-Rob. His real name is Kevin Robinson. Kevin Robinson is a professional BMX bike rider who has won a lot of world championships. We had two assemblies with K-Rob in the gym. He taught us about treating others the way we want to be treated. First grade took STEM today and as a class reward because all the classes filled the fish tank and put their big stuffed shark in the tank. Second grade collected food and clothes for the Harwich Food Pantry. They took a field trip to learn how we help our community.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Avery Gibson, and I'm in Ms. Crowley's 4th grade class. This past month, the 4th grade went to the Cape Cod Art Museum. We got to see famous pictures from famous people. We got to learn about many artists and what they accomplished in the history of art. We also got to learn about abstract and lines. Also, some 4th graders got to be in Great Books, which is an advanced reading program. Lately, we have been reading Wonder, which is about a boy named Augie who was born with a birth defect. Thank you for this opportunity to tell you what we have been doing since January. Fins up!
Before you guys go, does anybody have any questions? Or Ms. Stout?
I would just say this is my favorite part of the school committee meeting. Thank you for brightening it up.
Anything else? Mr. Duval.
I just want to say, have a fun vacation.
Oh, yes.
It's a good way to start.
Thank you very much. Great job. Next up, Grace Boyle, Monomoy Regional High School student rep. Hi.
Hi.
How
I
are
don't
you?
know how I'm going to follow that up. Hello. It's so nice to see you guys all again. My name is Grace Boyle, and I'm a junior at Monomoy, and I'm so excited to have this opportunity to share with you all the amazing things that go on in our district. I was so lucky to have this month be the first month I'm reporting on because I can tell you honestly it's been the busiest month of my life, and so I have a lot to talk about. It's kind of long, but bear with
Stop
me.
at 10.
Okay. Okay. I'll try to fit it in. It's good stuff, so bear with me. To start off, the last report that Lauren gave was on the eve of the championship game for boys basketball. Although it was fought with heart and hustle, Monomoy did lose by a pretty significant amount. Although the defeat was tough, a multitude of good things came from this. The boys were still champions in their league. They thrived against all odds with a preceding record of winning one game last season. And the entire student body came all the way to Brockton through the snow and decked out in patriotic attire to make up a fan section of roughly 100 people. And Brockton is far away from here, so that means a lot. Girls basketball fared very well in their season as well, with a record of 11-9 and sending 2 girls to the All-Star game. Both hockey teams also had good records, and the girls sent 1 player from Monomoy to the All-Star games. With these seasons coming to a close, the new door of spring sports opened up. Softball, league champions last year, has continued their winning streak as of today as they face off Sturgis West. Baseball is off to a rocky start with 2 losses and 1 win, but they have the chance to rectify this as the season is still young. The lacrosse program has virtually doubled as compared to last year, and the girls have the numbers to make their own team instead of combining with Tech as they did last year. Both teams are starting off with better records than last year, and any improvement is good to hear while building a program. March 15th to 18th was the week of this year's musical, Catch Me If You Can. I love seeing the musical every year because it is a great reminder of how lucky we are to have a thriving arts program here at Monomoy. There's such talent in students and teachers involved. Stars Colleen Cronin, Christian Pavlakis, and of course Jack Watson, who was suffering from the flu during all 5 shows, were absolutely incredible. The actors on stage and the crew off stage never ceases to impress everyone. On the 18th, Human Rights and the Spirit Committee hosted their annual Chili Fest, and they raised over $300 for both clubs, which is great. The next week, in preparation for the Stand DC trip, Mr. Dixon orchestrated a Skype call with some of the people from the Holocaust Museum, which helped the group gain prior knowledge and about the museum itself and about lobbying, and that helped to give the experience much more meaning. The Stand trip itself was amazing. I was lucky enough to go with 15 other students, Mr. Dixon, Ms. Gleason, and 2 incredible parent volunteers that hopefully did not get too sick of us by the end of the trip. We set off from Cape Cod at 3 in the morning, and we're doing things nonstop until we landed in Logan Monday night. Because of this, we had the opportunity to do so much, including the Museum of African American History and Culture, which was my favorite, the Holocaust Museum, the Museum of Natural History, the National Art Gallery, a tour of the Supreme Court, a tour of the Capitol building, and a day of lobbying. Being face-to-face with such significant, authentic parts of history was just incredible. And by a stroke of luck, while we were lobbying, we actually got to meet with Representative Keating himself and talk to him about the issues we were interested in. The next weekend, Key Club went to its first ever district educational conference. It was a great group of kids and some of the best advisors we could ask for, Ms. Please and Ms. Kelly, and we really had a lot of fun and learned a lot from the other groups there. We were also able to vote on the higher up positions, such as the governor for the entire District of New England, which is a girl from Cape Cod, so that's cool. The hotel we stayed at also had a pool, so that kept members happy between the long caucuses and the meetings. On March 30th, the music department put on the Pops concert, and it had a Disney theme, so it was fun for people of all ages. The talent displayed was overwhelming, as usual, when it comes to the chorus or the band. The National Art Honor Society also put on Disney Kids Night before the doors opened to the concert for kids to play Disney games and do crafts and decorate cookies or get their face painted. We all dressed up as Disney characters. I was Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, and my friend was Lilo. For some reason, I thought I was getting the better half of that deal, and I definitely wasn't. April 7th was prom. The week leading up to it was full of excitement and enthusiasm demonstrated by participation in the Spirit Days. It was like Purple Day, and then there was Table Wars, and it was Twin Day. It was really fun. Prom was hosted at the beautiful Quasit, which has a 5-star rating now, so it's cool. It was such a fun and memorable experience. Many people who went to this and that had also gone to Nauset prom said that this one was better. After prom was also incredible, and we want to thank everyone, all the parents and the people of the town who donated, for giving us the opportunity to have a safe, fun place to go after prom. Also, we said goodbye to one of our best buddies, Dan Brady, since he's aging out of the high school program. His radiant smile and his knowledge about the Celtics are going to be missed throughout the halls. The TV production class, who had worked closely with him since he was an opener for the morning announcements, made a video tribute to his time here. They interviewed students, teachers, and the janitors, asking their favorite things about and what we will miss about Dan. Also, Jocelyn Hour is a month in, and it's a wild success. Students take your trust very seriously and in no way turn it into an hour-long lunch. We use it for club meetings, we use it for AP review, and to do homework, especially if you don't have a seminar. It's extremely helpful. Finally, on a happy note, the You Are Important wall has delighted the student body. I don't know if you saw it when you come in. It's on the wall right there. And it's like the individualistic approach made people feel like personally important, which was really good. And good things have spread, as one student took it upon herself to make one for the teachers. And I don't know if you guys saw it, it's on the other wall. And she started with about 15 individuals, and then other students added on saying what they loved about other specific teachers, which was really nice. And that's all I got. Thank you so much for listening.
Don't go away.
Thank you.
I'm sure there were questions. Ms. Stout.
I just have a statement. It does sound exhausting. I don't know how
Yes.
you do all this, but
I'm
very
tired.
exciting. It's a lot to do for this smaller size school, so very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Grace.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Great
Thank
job.
you.
All right, now we'll have public comment. I want to notify anybody that wants to address the school committee that it is our policy to allow anybody to speak for up to 5 minutes on any particular subject. However, if the topic in the public comment is not a topic which is on our agenda for the evening, the school committee will not be discussing or in direct response to the public comment. Is there anybody who would like to address the school committee? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Barnes.
Good evening, members of the school committee. I'm Rachel Barnes, the English department head at the Monomoy Regional High School. I'm also the parent of a freshman here at the high school and a taxpayer in the town of Chatham. I wish to thank you this evening for your willingness to receive public input and act upon it in a timely fashion. When difficult situations arise, there may be the temptation to set them aside, but your agenda for this evening reflects that you are willing to take a critical look at the concerns brought to you by your community. Next, I feel it's important to share that everyone here in this room is on the same side, acting on behalf of children, families, and our community. Where we find ourselves at odds is in what this should look like in meetings held for this purpose. I look forward to your public comments this evening on this topic in the hopes that the concerns shared with you are addressed in a meaningful and positive way. Your words and actions continue to matter in how we're perceived as a school community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Ann Howe. I'm a full-time resident and voter and overly educated myself with a PhD and a master's and a Fulbright and all of that, and used to teach at a college level. But I'm totally...
Speaking short words for us, though.
Hey, you can handle it. You're on the school committee. I'm actually here to put in my 2 cents as somebody who transitioned from all of that academe to being in the practical high-tech world, to being a full-time citizen of this town. And my 2 cents is to really urge you to keep the civics course as part of the graduation requirement. For an economic reason. It sets people up to be aware at a very basic level of, say they become lawyers, say they become accountants, but I'm going to make an even harder economic argument for it. It sets you up to understand how to get government money, how to get funding vehicles and apply so that the monies that become available at a federal level, at a state level, are something that, should you become a full participant in the town, you know how to structurally approach optimizing what the town has access to when it needs it. And I've been involved recently with a group who are all highly educated and all didn't have that course, and none of them are recent high school graduates. And somebody said, how do you apply for federal money? What's a funding vehicle? And you have to have the understanding of the civic structure in order to make sure that you understand how to support the town's interests. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Judith Underwood, and I have 2 children in the school system, and we live in Harwich, and I didn't attend the last meeting, but I did watch it on the videos, and I just want to thank the school committee members for asking what I thought were very good questions. I've taught high school for 5 years, and I know curriculum development can be challenging at times, and I think there was some oversight that wasn't intended, but I really do thank the committee for their questions. I think they were excellent questions, and I think they were misrepresented in the newspaper article, and that concerns me. So I encourage everyone to please watch the recording of the meeting, because I think our school committee does a great job. I think our teachers do a great job, and it'd be a pity if that, you know, their positions were not clear on what their actual jobs were. But I think the school committee's job is to ask good questions. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir? I apologize if I don't remember everybody's names. I know we've spoken before.
Question is whether I can remember my name, which I think I can. It's Bob Weiser. I've spoken here before, and I'm not going to beat the dead horse about what I spoke about the last time I spoke. But I am concerned about the I got to watch my language. I was going to call it a contest of a certain type, but I won't say that because that would be inappropriate language for our meeting. And that's what I want to speak about. The use of the word humiliating. I didn't see anybody humiliated when I watched the tape of that meeting, but I did hear the word used. I think that let me say it succinctly. I consider myself a very big supporter, publicly and privately, of public education. I'm a union guy all my life. I support teachers. I support them as union members, and I support them as citizens and as leaders in our community. But I do not think that teachers should be advising school committee members on whether they should step down or not. I think that is an overstep. I don't think the members of the school committee who asked questions at that meeting overstepped in asking questions. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about school committee members asking all questions that come to mind. I don't think there's anything humiliating about being asked questions that you don't know the answers to. If you don't know the answers, we can find them for next time. There's nothing wrong with that. And the idea that we've gotten into this sort of a conflict over the asking of questions, and that we've used words like humiliating to describe polite questions, I think that is inappropriate. And that's where the inappropriateness is in my mind as a citizen, as a taxpayer, as an advocate for the school department. I've spoken in public at town meeting in support of the school budget on more than one occasion. Mr. Carpenter knows that I've done that. and I'll continue to do it. But I will not support the idea that because questions are asked, people should act as if they've been humiliated. I think our staff is much more sophisticated than that. And I don't know where that concept originated, except what I saw in the meeting when I watched it on the video. So I am concerned about that, and I hope that when this topic comes up for discussion later, that apologies are made in all of the necessary directions so we can carry on our business as citizens. I expect school committee members to ask these questions because I'm a citizen. I can't be here at every meeting. I elected these people. Every one of you who's from Harwich probably got a vote from me. That means you're doing my service when you ask questions, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Jordan.
Hi, my name is Joy Jordan. I have 4 students in the district. I wasn't actually planning to get up and talk because I've already sent an email to the school committee sharing my thoughts, but I felt like there needed to be a little bit of balance in the public comment because I am one of the people that was uncomfortable with the way in which some of the questions were asked at the last meeting. I agree that it's important to ask questions. I think it can be done in a way that is constructive and collaborative, not argumentative and impolite. I had my 10-year-old here with me at the last meeting because he had the privilege of speaking to the school committee, and I was uncomfortable that he was watching adults speak to each other like this, adults that were supposed to all be working together for his benefit. And I don't think that's okay. I think it is very important to ask hard questions. I think it's important to do so in a polite, constructive manner. And so again, I just wanted to add some balance to the public comment. Thank you for all you guys do.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am?
My name is Claire Hooper, and I have a student in 9th grade here at the high school. I have a graduate also from Chatham, and I love that my students went here and are going here. I also have to respond to the comments. I wasn't going to speak, but I respectfully disagree with the gentleman that spoke before, because I also watched it, and I actually printed out the letter that was written to the committee, because I agree with everything that was said. I also have to say I do work in the main office here, and I watch every day the way the staff works so hard and is here for long hours and spends hours and hours and just dedicated. And I just feel as a parent and as a fellow staff member that, yes, questions are crucial. But I was wondering why so many questions have to be asked over and over and over. That was what concerned me. And ask the questions being asked to the teachers that are professionals to me. And like I said, my student is here, and I've asked questions before, but I respect the training, the education of the teachers and of the superintendent and the district and everything. And I feel like I can always say whatever I want to say. But one of the things I found interesting is that when the gentleman said you should ask as many questions as possible, it says under how we communicate for your protocol, we shall channel all requests for information through the chair and or superintendent rather than directly to the staff. The chair and superintendent will ensure each member has equal access to information. So, I mean, I think that's what I'm referring to. And I felt that two final things. There was a vote taken on the curriculum and the global studies, and it was a majority won. And that's also, I believe, said here in the protocol. Once that's decided, then you move on. But it was brought up again and again and again. Also, I felt that there were attacks towards the teachers, and that these are department heads, and it was just, it really upset me. And I'm just really disappointed in how that happened. And I'm really, really hoping that now that the protocol is here and I know what it is and everybody else has probably read it, I hope, and I hope that there's somehow that we can all work, like Mr. Burke had said at the end, the lack of cooperation is just very frustrating. I don't understand why the school committee isn't with the staff and supportive and cares. It seems like there's not a caring going on. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Any repeat customers? Okay. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is recognitions. Mr. Carpenter.
I just have a couple. There are a few donations that we've had that I want to acknowledge. The Art of Charity provided $400 for Uganda Pen Pals, shipping a gift box of school supplies to 118 Ugandan high school students. The Art of Charity also provided $300 for flags from countries from around the world to hang in the library to represent the many cultures and nationalities at Monomoy Regional High School. Miss Emily Mazzati for donating transportation costs to the JFY Youth Advisory Day, and $500 from the Cape and Islands Workforce Investment Board for the high school robotics program. And the last thing I just want to recognize is that last Friday was a memorial for Mary Roy, and I think our community really lost a great one with Mary's passing. I know my own family was touched by Mary. My daughter had her as one of the last students in her last year here with Monomoy, and I credit her for a lot of the growth that I saw in my own daughter, and I wish her family and her husband the best.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any comments or discussion? Did anybody object if we got a moment of silence for Ms. Roy? Thank you. Reports and discussions. First, Chatham Elementary Grade 1 field trip to the Roger Williams Zoo, Providence, Rhode Island. Ms. Dillon.
Hi, I'm Robin Millen, principal of Chatham Elementary School, and I'm here on behalf of our first grade team, Janice Campbell, Sandy Hansen, and Brandy Frohmeyer. They have requested approval from the school committee to take the first grade classrooms, all the students, to Providence to go to the Roger Williams Zoo on May 19th in 2017. They provided me with a little note, so I'll just read it directly for the rationale. So they want you to know that this trip coincides with the first grade Next Generation Science Standards, which includes a unit on the animal study. Each student will choose an animal from the zoo for intensive study, preparing and presenting a report on their animal at the culmination activity. The report includes an art component, and that they will be doing that at the zoo. Each student will study, draw, and sketch their animal and take field notes for their final report and presentation. So they also want the school committee to know why they chose crossing state lines and going to Providence, Rhode Island, and this is their words. So it is comparable distance to the Franklin Park Zoo, but it is easier to get to. There is usually less traffic, so it's actually less time to get there. The park itself is nonprofit, and the quality of care of the animals is superior to the other zoos visited in Massachusetts. Their words. Okay. So they are requesting approval.
Any questions or comments? Is there a motion? Mr. Duval.
I move that we approve the Chatham Elementary School first grade field trip to Roger Williams Zoo in Providence, Rhode Island.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is labeled homelessness.
So I had a question that was asked of me by school committee member, Donna Richardson, and a community member had reached out to her was just asking questions about homelessness, and I told Donna that it would be a good topic to research and just bring back to the committee to share with you and share with those that are in attendance and watching just what is homelessness, what does it look like in our school district. And because I think we all may have perceptions of what homelessness is based on stereotypes, and just want to kind of give it a face for our district and our communities. So the state defines homelessness as if we have children that are lacking a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. And that, what that looks like can vary in situation to situation. To date this school year, we have seen 26 students within our district have qualified as being homeless during this school year, which represents about 1.4% of our student body. The good news is that many of these families over the course of a school year will find fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence for their children. So we'll see families that will come onto that list. We'll see families that move off of that list over the course of the year. Of those 26 that have been on this list over the course of the year, 9 of these students have found homes. 4 of the students were at one point during the school year living at Nickerson State Park seasonally. They have now, their family has now found a home situation. 3 of those students were in shelters, and now they have transitioned from shelters to homes. 2 were in temporary custody situations. For instance, if a student comes out of a home and goes into foster care, they actually are defined or qualify as being homeless for that period of time that they're in foster care, and have moved from foster care into a situation with a family. At present, we have 17 Monomoy students listed as homeless. Of those 17, 13 of them are doubled up. And what doubled up means is that you have 2 families that are living together in the same residence. In some cases, it's one family, or it's the family's living with the grandparent or friend or relative. So you'll have 2 families living in that same residence. There's one of the 17 is living in a hotel in our area, and we have 3 that are in foster care. When it comes to homelessness, the students are protected under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, and things that we should all keep in mind, or that you should know, is that the way the law reads is that when a student becomes homeless, they have the right to remain enrolled in the school of origin. So if they're with us in Monomoy and they become homeless and displaced to another community, so if they move out of Harwich or Chatham to Barnstable or Yarmouth or somewhere else, they have the right to stay here, not just say, okay, well, your homeless situation has caused you to be displaced from our communities. You have to go to the school in that new community where you're living. So what you'll find is that school districts will work with the family, and the family has the choice. They can choose to come to Monomoy still, and then it's incumbent upon the school district to work with the family to provide transportation. So, so part of the McKinney-Vento Act is that the school district provides transportation to some families that have become homeless, that are living outside of our 2 towns now, to provide transportation for those students each day. So at the moment, we have 5 of these 17 students are currently homeless in towns outside of Chatham and Harwich, and the school district is working with those families if they need to provide transportation for those students to our schools. There are also, because of that same act, there are 4 families that are homeless that got displaced into our communities, that their school district is providing transportation so that they can go to the school that they were originally with. And the way the school districts work this is that we share costs. So we would share costs with the school district. So we would pay part of the transportation of the child to that school. The school district where this child would be going picks up part of it, and the same way it goes for those that get displaced from Harwich or Chatham to other communities. We have, the law requires that you have a homeless education liaison, and our Director of Student Services, Melissa McGuire, is that liaison, and she would work with the families, in some cases courts and state agencies to go and make sure that we meet the needs, the educational needs of these children and the transportation needs, so that we can get them to and from. At the moment, or at any particular moment, Monomoy may have anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen students that would be homeless, and it does speak to some of the socioeconomic struggles that our communities do face. The good news is that most of our homeless students are in at least a doubled up situation under a roof, and many of these doubled up situations, they're with family. And I think that I think summarizes most, but not all. So I just want to kind of leave it there as sort of an overview of what homelessness does look like for some of our students.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I had no idea of what the situation was in our respective communities in this area, and I think it's important that we all are aware of that. It's good to know that the definition encompasses students who are not what we might think of as literally homeless, having no place to live, so that when it's reported that we have 17 homeless students, it's good to know that it's not quite as extreme, but obviously it's very serious. And I think this is the kind of thing we should probably get a report on annually. I think I'd like to know. I think the public would like to know not only what the situation is with regard to members of our community, most important members of our community, by the way, the students, and what their status is. There might be an opportunity at some point for members of the public to take an action, or for us to find a way in which we might provide additional services if necessary under certain circumstances. Anybody have any other thoughts on that? Okay. Thank you again. Our next item on the agenda involves one of our members who has temporarily left the room. Mr. Carpenter, there's a couple of items on the agenda that I sense would be fairly quick to deal with. Which of the other items do you think would be the shortest, the quickest to deal with while we wait for the return?
Well, I could, if we could jump down to the regional agreement. I think at least what I can present to you can be quick. I think it probably fit better if it was right after number 5, but Barbara's going to pass around the latest legalese from our district's council. I think when we last met, or the meeting before that, school committee member Russell provided some wording to hopefully include a way that we could look at if we needed to maintain some sort of equitable student-teacher ratios, particularly between the elementary schools. How could we potentially modify the regional agreement that would allow us to redistrict, for lack of a better word, to provide equitable class sizes between Harwich Elementary School and Chatham Elementary School. So the word...
I apologize for interrupting, but I realized it just sunk in what you said about how this would be a better topic to bring up after the 5th topic. Would you mind if we interrupt you at that point?
That's fine. It'll just lack the segue.
The power of the chair. No, I understand that the issue of the kindergarten situation has a direct bearing on the regional agreement, so I think we should cover them back to back. So I apologize to everyone for the confusion. So we'll go back to our original plan here, original item. Next item is what we listed as school committee norms and protocols, which I've listed that way to be fairly broadly defined as first of all, a discussion of recent complaints that have been made and hopefully or potentially lead to a broader discussion about school committee norms and protocols. And in the event that there's anybody watching who wanted to address us further on these at another meeting, I would invite them to come to another meeting. Our norms and protocols are posted on our website, and given how important they are to how we operate our meetings, I would suggest that we would always welcome comments on our norms and protocols and how well we're doing with them at any meeting. Having said that, more specifically, I will note, as Ms. Hooper mentioned in her public comment, there was a letter that the school committee received signed by, I believe, all of the department heads. All the department heads raising concerns about the conduct of our last meeting on March 23rd. And the letter itself, I believe, is not all that specific about who the people were that we're referring to, but we also have basically a formal complaint that was raised, which is directly associated with the letter from the head of each department. And it's a briefer, I think it's a fair summary of the issues raised in the letter. The letter is a public document. Anybody that would like to receive a copy can notify the school committee, notify me if they choose, and I'll make sure they get it by email or mail if you don't have email. But because I think that the formal complaint is specifically directed at specific individuals and is also a fair summary of the, and is not as long, I'll read this into the record. This is from member Nancy Scott. I'd like to formally notify you of several potential violations I witnessed to our agreed upon school committee norms and protocols at our regular meeting of March 23rd, 2017. I have attached our approved norms and protocols with the violations I feel occurred highlighted. First, under the heading, Our Limits of Power, I feel Ms. Stout violated, quote, we will accept the majority vote on school committee decisions once they are made, end quote. During Mr. Alexander's social studies curriculum presentation, Ms. Stout continued her disagreement with the decision the school committee made regarding changes to graduation requirements. I'm going to read all of these before we address any of them. Second, under the heading, quote, How we treat each other, end quote, I feel Ms. Stout violated, quote, we endeavor to avoid words and actions that create negative impressions of an individual or the district, end quote, and quote, we will work to build trust between and among the staff by treating everyone with dignity and respect, even in times of disagreement, end quote. During Ms. Stout's comments regarding her dissatisfaction of the school social studies courses presented, she called them, quote, a disgrace. She also commented, if we don't have a teacher passionate in teaching government, we should get someone passionate. Third, Ms. Ryder requested several pieces of information directly to the staff during the program of studies presentation, parentheses, specifically to Mr. Alexander and Ms. Flint. This is a violation of our norms and protocols heading of, quote, how we communicate, where our protocol is to, quote, channel all requests for information through the chair and or superintendent rather than directly to staff, end quote. Fourth and last, I feel the timing of the requests and the tone used by Ms. Ryder also violates a norm and protocol under the heading of, quote, how we treat each other, end quote. The conversation and line of questioning regarding Mr. Alexander's baseball and society course and the district's computer programming courses are a violation of, quote, avoid words and actions that create negative impressions of an individual or the district, and quote, signed Nancy Scott. So those are the, now I want to notify the public that, that we did hold an executive session this evening on which which was intended to deal with this topic in the executive session. Ms. Stout and Ms. Ryder have elected, as they are entitled to under the open meeting law, they have chosen to, instead of having the topic to be discussed in executive session, to have it discussed in the open session. So let the public know that we did not discuss these accusations against Ms. Stout and Ms. Ryder in our executive session. I'll open the floor. Discussion. Ms. Ryder.
There was another point that was raised. You didn't read that point that I sent.
You were referring to the fact that there was a complaint made against another individual that was not contained in here?
Right.
That was something that we did deal with in executive session, so we're going to report on the results of our executive session.
Okay.
We will either report on it at a later time, or if that person seeks to, he or she can address that this evening. But I would suggest that
I will.
Mr. Russell?
Yes.
Mr. Russell, go ahead.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry Russell.
Would you want to summarize the issue that was raised?
During an executive session, yes, yeah.
Well,
I had actually reviewed the letter that I received 10 days ago, and I had to do it twice because I didn't catch my role in it. On the first page in the third paragraph, similar regarding our protocol, it states how we treat each other. Quote, we endeavor to avoid words and actions that create negative impressions of an individual or a school committee or the district. And then it goes on to describe what occurred. Being a total technology neophyte, my wife queued for me her iPod, and I brought it in tonight and captured the 3 minutes or so that I had a conversation with Caitlin Coughlin, a new staff member who heads up a brand new program called an academic support program for, I would call it, struggling youngsters. So I get a B maybe in setting this up, and it conveyed to me at least the message.
A-.
There was one, thank you. There was, let me just preface very quickly. I had a career in education for 40 years, 25 years as a principal. So I take a lot of pride in what I've done here in the last 7 years on this building committee, as well as on this school committee. We're all human. But in my career, part of my words were part of my vocation. So I try to be very, very careful how I present public words and compliments or correctives. That being said, there was a letter, in the letter, makes a comment that I mentioned credentials. According to this, and I'm not going to play this, I never use the word credentials. I use the word, what was your curriculum background? So what I concluded as far as my issue in this, and I've typed up a brief note, I'll turn it over to the chairman and he will convey it to the department heads. After reviewing the entire video of the March 23rd, 2017 school committee meeting, and specifically my exchange with Ms. Coughlin regarding the new academic support program, I find the letter writer clearly misinterpreted my intent and my tone. I feel my questions and comments reflected my support for the teacher, as well as the new program. Now in the letter it said, unknown name, but Mr. Russell, either he was showing his curiosity, I was not. I was showing interest. And if I wasn't showing curiosity, it could have led down to a road where the teacher might not be up to the task of being a pleasant teacher. Totally not part of my comments at all. Due to the inherent challenges of this new program, I was most interested in Ms. Coughlin's view of the program's early progress, so I asked her that question. Key to the program's success is a teacher, in my opinion, with the necessary skills and confidence to support struggling students, as are the managerial skills necessary to deal with 5-year grade spans, grade 8 through 12, with maybe 5 kids in the room with 3 different grades coming to her. My reference to Ms. Coughlin's curriculum background, quote unquote, was clearly to underscore her competence in this area. Thus, I was interested in hearing Ms. Coughlin's views and hopefully having the public hear her comments, either on TV or the few people that were here, of her teaching experience in this new venue from Monomoy Regional High School. Regarding my tone, my concluding remarks, and it was clear to me here when I played it, I said thank you and excellent. Now, where I came from, thank you meant respect and courtesy. Excellent, the middle school definition, means first class, very good. Clearly, that conveyed my respect and support of Ms. Coughlin's endeavors. So that's really the message I hopefully will get back to Ms. Coughlin and to clear anything up, and also the letter writer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Are there any members who would like to comment or have questions regarding Mr. Russell's statement or presentation or the complaint against Mr. Russell? Okay. I'll open up the floor for the remaining. Ms. Scott.
I just want to say that the letter that I wrote is not meant as an attack on anybody or anything that anybody has said. I just think that it's an important reminder, and it's important to remember, for us to remember, that the words we say are powerful, and the tone that we use towards people when we speak is powerful. And sometimes the questions we ask are powerful. And I think it's also very important for us to remember that while we are a public body and we have our meeting held in public session and we're on TV and watched by millions at home, it's important to remember that we have limitations as school committee members. And we have certain roles that we play, and we have rules that we have to follow. And one of the reasons that we met over the course of 4 meetings with Ms. Presser from the Mass Association of School Committees to kind of go through and review what our rules are and what rules that we have to follow, and to come up with these norms and protocols, was to have a written reminder in a very concise format as opposed to the binders that we have and then the legal document that we have that we have to adhere to. So I just want to make sure that specifically Ms. Ryder and Ms. Stout understand that my intention is not to attack what happened and what was said. It's to basically point out that we have to remember certain things.
I also owe an obligation to Ms. Scott to point out that the complaint that she brought was actually brought at my request, only in the sense that I felt that everybody who received the letter from the department heads, although the letter was not specific about who the individuals were, we all know who the department head letter was referring to, and in order to follow our own procedure in terms of how to deal with it, I felt it was important that we have it formalized. So although I don't doubt Ms. Scott's sincerity in the way she phrased the violation, I do want to point out that it was done at my request. Any other comments? Ms. Ryder.
I have extras of these if anybody wants to look at them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See? If anybody wants one. After receiving this letter, I spoke to the executive director at the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, MASC, and I found this document, which is what we used as our guide for creating the norms and protocols. And I wanted to point out a few things in this document. I actually highlighted in gray and in yellow, but for some reason the gray didn't come out. A couple things that are important to remember, that there's a word about norms and beliefs right in the beginning of this document. Although rules of order are essential to an effective public meeting. Personal norms and protocols to guide individual or group behaviors are neither established in law nor subject to imposition by anyone outside the board itself. So I think that's an important point, that these are norms and protocols to guide us as a school committee and within our school committee, and they cannot be imposed on us by anyone else. Further, they say in this, I guess you could call it a preamble, many people think it is demeaning and condescending to attempt to prescribe behaviors on those whom the people have chosen to represent them, especially adults who are perfectly capable of managing themselves. So, behavior should not be prescribed on us. Sorry, I have to go back and read this for a second. We should be adhering to our norms and protocols, but that does not, these do not take precedence over law or our rights to, for example, free speech, which is a First Amendment guaranteed right. Democracy demands that the individual use one's best judgment as one perceives it rather than succumbing to the will of another, whether it is resolving a matter of policy, fulfilling your fiduciary responsibilities, or providing leadership. So, to me, it appears that someone else is trying to impose their will upon us as a school committee to essentially keep us from asking questions, when part of our responsibility as a school committee is to ask questions on behalf of the public that elected us. On this page, there is a footnote. There are a couple footnotes. Let's see. Committee members will support the official position of the school committee. And the footnote to this is, some individuals object to this provision because it stifles dissent and disagreement. It is important to note that, quote, supporting the official position of the school committee, end quote, does not preclude principled disagreement or future attempts to change policy, but simply not to undermine the work of the majority's policy of the district. And this is a key point. When I spoke to the director at Mask, he said, there's no reason not to bring up your principled objections. And in my case, I had a principled objection to the weakening of the curriculum at the high school. And I was not trying to undermine the work of the majority's policy and the majority's decision. He said clearly that if you are out on the street talking to people and saying, and trying to undermine policy in that manner, that's trying to undermine the policy or trying to undermine the majority vote. But if you have a principled objection, there is no reason for you not to bring that up in public, in a school committee meeting. There's no reason not to ask questions or make a principled objection. Footnote on the next page, which refers to,
Paragraph 5.
yes, but I have to read it again, sorry, there's a lot there. Paragraph 5. School committee members agree to refer important questions and concerns they receive from members of the school community to the superintendent, and there's a little more there, but the footnote said this is a best practice to follow. Citizens have an unrestricted right to contact their elected officials, and this right may not be abridged by the superintendent or chair. This actually doesn't apply. I was looking for something that actually applied more to the allegation of requesting information, but I have that on a separate piece of paper. In the section under other norms, beliefs, and protocols that school districts may consider, there is a line that says, creating an environment for full and free debate or civil discourse in a safe environment. And the footnote to that says, This targets intellectual bullies or others who would intimidate colleagues from raising or addressing important questions. It also speaks to those who would demand civil discourse, in quotes, as a vehicle to silence principled critics who may become passionate. Nothing should prevent a member from raising one's voice in passionate argument as opposed to shouting down someone else's point of view. Now, the first part of this applies. I don't think that Ms. Stout or I became passionate and shouted down someone else's point of view. We are allowed to raise and address questions, and I don't see that asking questions was out of line. The next point, addressing issues and avoiding the ad hominem attack with the footnote. The footnote, while it can be tempting to attack the individual making an argument as a way of refuting that perspective, members are encouraged to focus on the issue and the facts rather than on personalities. So that I thought was important because it seemed when Mr. Burke had spoke, it was an attack on the two of us that were asking questions. And to me, that felt like, if there was any personal attack, that felt like a personal attack on us. So now I will take out my other piece of paper. I found it unfortunate to receive this letter from the department heads. It was disappointing. We're all on the same side of trying to make sure that our children have the best education. We're all in the same community. And it really felt like an us against them, and let's make sure that school committee members don't ask questions or don't ask certain questions that may make people uncomfortable. But it is our role to ask questions. And if they were perceived in a negative manner or as an attack, I only have control over the words that I say. I don't have control over how they are received or perceived by the people that are receiving them. I watched the school committee video a couple of times, and I honestly could not see where there was anything that was out of line that I had asked or I had said. It was asking questions, making comments. So let's see. I could say a lot more, but that's probably enough for the moment. If I'm allowed to speak later, I could address this, but I don't want to go on and on if it's not necessary.
Absolutely. Before I'm going to open up to any other comments. I just want to clarify for people who are paying attention or watching from home. What Ms. Ryder has been reading from is a document created by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees does not have any authority over any school committee. That's a fact. I think it's fair to say that their role is to assist school committees in helping school committees become better school committees. We've had classes with them, a number of classes. In fact, all of us have attended classes put on by the Mass Association of School Committees. Just want to make sure that everybody who's listening realizes that what Ms. Ryder is reading from are recommendations from the Mass Association of School Committees. They're not rules and regulations that are imposed upon us. This is another view of how they think school committees should operate. I think it's fair to say that once we've adopted norms and protocols, that's a little more than a recommendation. Those are guidelines that we have agreed to be bound by. And I don't know, withhold any comments specifically at this point about what was said and what I think about it, but I just want to be sure that everybody realizes the difference between recommendations from the Mass Association and the rules and regulations that we have adopted as a committee. You can respond to that, or does anybody else want to have any comments about what Ms. Ryder has said? Ms. Stout?
Well, the only thing I'd say is that that's our leading establishment to go to, is the Mass Association of School Committees, that knows more about school committees than any of us. That's why we go to them. So I don't want to put them down at all.
Did you think I was putting them down at all? I wasn't sure what your comment was directed at.
It sounded like a diminishment of our association of school committees.
And I guess I'm doing a poor job of communicating. My point was only that they are a very helpful resource for recommendations. Mr. Kuchar, who's the executive director, who many numbers have spoken to, also reminded me that they have no real authority. They state their opinion, and we welcome their opinion, and we're free to accept or reject their views. Ms. Ryder?
I think it's fair to say they provide guidance. Guidance for all the school committees of the state.
Very well said. I agree. Anybody else have a comment or question about Ms. Ryder's comments? Mr. Duvall?
You pointed out civil discourse, and you gave an example of shouting someone down. I also look at civil discourse as showing common courtesy in how you ask questions. When people come to give presentations to us, we're not here to badger them with questions. If we have a legitimate question, if it's offered in a polite way, if they don't know, they're going to say, I don't know. Or for most of us, if we're asking a question, could you get us the information on, because most of the time they don't have finite notes on how many children have taken a specific course, or, it's just, those type of questions to someone doing an overview presentation are not fair. If the question is posed, could you get back to us with how many kids have taken this course? I think it goes a long way.
Ms. Ryder?
When I ask a question at a school committee meeting of any person, if they don't have the answer to hand, I am perfectly happy if they say, I'd be happy to get that to you when I can. Okay, great. I didn't know I needed to preface my question with that caveat that, please get it to me when you can if you don't have it on hand. I thought that was understood. If it wasn't understood, I can make it more clear in the future. I was just asking for something, and I didn't necessarily expect to have it given right away. Saying I'll get back to you is perfectly valid. In fact, when people ask me for information, I will say that's exactly what I will say. If I don't have it right there, sorry, I don't have it to hand, be glad to find out for you and get back to you. That's perfectly valid. If I inadvertently created a negative impression, well, that was not my intent at all.
Mr. Russell?
Independent of Karen's guideline as a follow-up on the protocol, I just glanced at it a few moments ago, so I really don't want to respond to that. Put it in a simpler sense. We're a committee of 8, 4 from Chatham and 4 from Howard. We're a staff here of 55, 60 students, learners and teachers. Independent of we all control and we all own our words and what the intention is, but put it in a musical sense. Part of our role as school committee members is to create a harmony. That's a type of harmony that also allows discourse and disagreement. Now that's simple, but it's hard. On our board, starting with myself, I have created less harmony. And when that happens, it becomes divisive. And when divisiveness happens, it creates dis-ease. And we know dis-ease creates an infection. All committees experience this. We are volunteers, so we don't have time to go back and reflect. But I would suggest that the committee and teachers, we all consider there's nothing better than a class that has created harmony with the kids. That we need, all of us, to measure our tones. How are we getting results with the tone we're using? Do people who are responding and listening, do they sense, and it's just as possible, that I didn't mean what I said, or that was heavy? And with that, we return to try to make nice music. Words are powerful. So we'd like to think that as this conversation goes on, it's more important than a lot of these agendas, that it's treated as a workshop for all of us here. That in fact, we can move on with the faculties and the teachers, the comment made by the secretary at the high school, that mentioning about support, the sense of no support. And yet, as I recall in my 7 years beginning launching the school, as well as all of the motions, whether it's a trip to Europe or an awesome lunch hour, we've had close to unanimity in votes in supporting the high school requests. So, but that's okay too. So one, this can be a very healthy experience for us, for all of us to move on that and try to continue to create this type of harmony that's really needed amongst the parents and the kids in the corridors here, and staff and members of the school committee. I absolutely fully agree that school committees should be at liberty to ask decent, clear, and answerable questions. Not just for ourselves, but for the public sitting at home, the 200 of them or the 400 of them that are interested. That's part of our role here. How silly it would be to sit here every 2 weeks and go on and not say word one. So what does that mean? It's how you ask the questions, how that tone signals the person that we're reaching. So hopefully we can all learn from this. I'm sorry, Sharon, I don't know if you wanted to say something, but
I think you probably said it better than I could. But my thought is similarly, that this is a learning and growing experience. I was at the meeting, watched the meeting, I saw nothing that Karen did that was unusual. Could we all do better? We all could do better. This is a learning experience.
Ms. Richardson.
I just want to say, as a school committee a person that represents the town, and I'm not in these classrooms, and the open meeting law prohibits us from talking about things. So the only way we can get information is by asking questions. And if sometimes when I feel attacked in some way by these letters, that, well, I don't want to ask questions, but I know that's not right, but anyway, I just feel that the way we need to get information is by asking questions. And I'm not attacking anyone, or I'm just trying to learn and do the best I can for the kids in this community.
Ms. Long.
I have many thoughts, and I agree with Mr. Russell that a successful committee is a committee that works together, and a committee that has challenges, and a committee that sometimes doesn't agree, but that's what makes us all individuals, and that's obviously why we're all here. Our towns have chosen us to be here to represent them. Addressing the norms and protocols, as Karen had brought them up, I feel that those were used by the teachers as a vessel and a guideline in a very appropriate fashion to portray how they felt, besides just writing a letter that blanketed their complaints. It applied very informative norms and protocols that we came up with and agreed with ourselves, and it gave them a base to explain why they were frustrated and upset. That being said, I don't feel as a school committee member that I cannot ask a question. I think it comes down to, if I have to think 2 or 3 times whether I should ask a question, I probably shouldn't. And it should go through the appropriate avenues, through the superintendent, through the chair, at a separate time, to be brought up at a separate time. I can still ask the question, I can still get the answers. As Ms. Ryder suggested, it's okay if someone says, you know what, I don't know that answer right now. I've been in many presentations myself before where I don't have that answer right now, but I'll get that for you. And that's acceptable, but there's a line with what's appropriate to ask and what's not appropriate to ask. And that is the purpose of the norms and protocols. I think what's important for the school committee is, are we following our norms and protocols? Or are we following the protocols and best practice for effective school committees by the Massachusetts Association of Schools? Because I feel like we're looking at 2 different sets of protocols now. And maybe we need to look closer and decide which one we're going to adopt. Maybe we need to revisit it if people feel that they can't ask questions. But I don't feel that way. I feel that if you ask questions in an appropriate manner and they're appropriate for the situation, in a nice tone, non-threatening, inquisitive, as sometimes I call Mr. Russell, we're just curious and we're here to speak for the public. But there's a right way to do it, and that's my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Stout?
Do you want to finish Karen's before I do mine, or do you want me to go ahead?
That seemed to, did you want to address anything further to the specific complaints raised?
Just a comment about what Ms. Long said. The protocols and best practices information that I gave out from MASC, our norms and protocols are actually pretty similar. I'm not sure why they seem so different, but I thought they were quite similar when we came up with them. I didn't have anything in particular to continue saying. I think Sharon should be able to speak.
Anything else on the issue raised by the complaints or the letter with regard to Ms. Ryder? Anybody else? Thank you for your comments. Ms. Stout, would you like to begin the discussion with regard to the complaints brought against you?
Yes, I'm not as lawyer-like as you and Karen. Like Mrs. Scott, I had no intent whatsoever in attacking at that meeting. Approaching the school committee meeting on March 23rd, like the department chairs, I was expecting a straightforward meeting. At the meeting prior to that, on March 9th, there had been many letters from people in the community supporting keeping government class as a requirement for graduation. There was much discussion, and the principal had told us that most of the students would still be taking government as an elective. The committee voted to drop government as a required class by a vote of 4-3, and that decision had been made. All was going very smoothly on the March 23rd meeting until the Social Studies program of studies was presented. The PowerPoint had the Kennedy years courses offered 3 different years. The history of baseball being offered 5 times, grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and many other electives being offered, including one just being developed. When I looked for the government civics course, I saw only that it was only once offered in grade 12, along with several other electives at that grade. I thought this must be an error, so I asked about it, and then after hearing that that was correct, I was caught off guard and made a statement that I would do differently if I could redo it. After the meeting, I sent an apology letter to Mr. Alexander through the superintendent and the principal, and in that letter, besides apologizing for using the term disgraceful, I restated that my comments were about the frequency of government and not directed at any teacher or the department. Further, I stated that I've always thought of the Social Studies Department as a strength of the school. Lastly, I stated how separated teachers and school committee are and suggested we might have a workshop session just to talk to each other. The statement about passionate was just in reference to a statement that the superintendent said about wanting people to teach something they were passionate about. There was concern expressed by some teachers that they wanted to know what our questions would be so they would be prepared for the presentations. I can understand that being helpful. Our committee was not given any information ahead of time on the presentation, so we had no stimulus to ask questions. If we would be provided with the PowerPoint presentation at least a week ahead of our meetings, most of us would have time to read it and probably generate some questions for people to be prepared to answer. Additionally, I would not have been caught off guard and would have responded quite differently. However, getting the PowerPoint a week ahead of time would not eliminate all questions from coming up, as some occur to us just during the presentation itself. It might be helpful to know that there are times that our superintendent and business manager do not have a piece of information at their fingertips and have to get back to our committee or town committees. No one can be prepared at their fingertips to have every question, right, all the knowledge at the right time. So being prepared, so getting back to us is fine. To try to resolve the communication problem and rift, I contacted the head of Massachusetts Association of School Committees after watching the video of the school committee meeting. He told me I did nothing wrong and that I was doing my job and there was not anything more for me to do. I did, however, want to resolve any bad feelings, so I met with Superintendent Carpenter and asked him to help mediate this. I said I was willing to meet with the department heads for this purpose. Although it was a very congenial meeting, no step was taken towards mediation. After the school committee chair returned from his vacation, I asked the same thing to set up a meeting, but that was not pursued. Lastly, I called the woman from MASC who helped us write the norms and protocols. She said that I'd already written an apology letter, so could think of nothing more for me to do, and said the term violation was not a good choice of us to use in our norms and protocols, as they were meant solely for the internal workings of the school committee towards helping each other by reminding each other when necessary when we forget them. They are to help us work together, not to be used against each other. These norms and protocols have never been brought up since they were developed a year and a half or so ago. I assure you that if somebody had mentioned at the meeting, that would have taken a different twist. I'm requesting that all materials come to us before meetings and be provided to us at least a week before to give us at least that time so we can get questions ahead of time to people if they occur to us then. I'm aware of many of the continually increasing demands on teachers and stressors they face as they continue to do the important work of educating our children. I'm proud of our school and our teachers. I am truly sorry for any discomfort or lack of appreciation that Mr. Alexander or any department chairs may have felt. If you know me, you know that's the furthest thing from my intent. And I'll pass that in for
Thank you.
the record.
Any comments or questions? Ms. Long.
I would just say to Ms. Stout that I think that the reason the norms and protocols probably don't come up is they shouldn't come up unless somebody thinks that we have, for lack of a better word, violated them. So it's probably why they haven't come up, unless you're speaking about something, them not coming up on an agenda item or something like that, unless I'm not understanding. Second to that would be just kind of going back as I process the Massachusetts Association of School Committee, if in fact our norms and protocols are so similar to theirs, then why are we quoting from the Mass Association and not from our own norms and protocols that we have developed? That doesn't make any sense to me. So if they're that similar, I don't understand. And furthermore, I felt that the letter from the teachers articulated quite well and followed the parameters of our norms and protocols. I don't think they're at fault for that. I think at this point the question to the school committee is, we need to move forward, and what is it that the letter is requesting of our members to do going forward at this point? I mean, everyone's obviously, no one meant harm, but we need to move forward. So what is it that our members need to do to move forward? What's the letter requesting of us?
Ms. Ryder.
A couple of responses to Ms. Long. Perhaps the reason we hadn't referred to the norms and protocols earlier, one of the reasons may be that they were not available anywhere that I could find online. I didn't have a copy of them, or if I did, they were buried in my other stacks of paper from other school committee meetings. I'm not sure. But that could be one reason. I don't know if they're currently online, but when I received this letter, they were not. The reason that I was quoting from the protocols and best practices from Mass is because the footnotes are guidance that's not added into the bullet points of norms and protocols. It's guidance to make clear that when you say this particular thing, it's to make clear what you mean on that and how far that guidance goes, how far that particular norm or protocol goes, and where the limits are. That's why I quoted from that, because those footnotes are extremely important. I also wanted to say that Sharon's point about receiving information ahead of time, one of the things that I didn't say, because I didn't want to go on and on, I don't know. I don't like to hear myself talk too much. I don't think other people do either. So, but when we get information ahead of time, then we are able to ask questions ahead of time. We did not get the PowerPoint presentation before the meeting. It came in our folder that we get on the table when we arrive. So that would have been helpful in this case, because I probably would have been able to ask questions beforehand. And I think that would have mitigated some of the things that have come up in this letter. Okay, I'm done.
Mr. Russell.
Just as a clarification off of Jackie's comment, it's my understanding, I think I directed to Sharon, the protocols have developed over a 6-hour workshops last fall, not a year and a half ago.
I'm corrected.
And the date we adopted and voted was October 27th, 2016. So
I just remember Amy Middleton was on it, because that's why she quit, when we were developing the norms and protocols. And so I figured that was a year and a half ago. I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
So either time flies or time is dragging, one or the other, right?
Mr. Duval.
To answer Ms. Long's question, they're looking for an apology to the teachers, the public at large, that we did. It was not our finest hour last meeting, and I offered that heartfelt apology to Mr. Alexander before our meeting was even over. And I think we as a school committee do owe that apology.
Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter.
I was just going to chime in. I think that the letter came because people that were at the meeting felt that that there was a dialogue that was taking place that I don't think that some on the school committee would want to be at the podium on the receiving end of that dialogue. I think it was more of just kind of how the dialogue took place. And in some cases, some words that probably in hindsight, we'd want to take back. And I know that you think the world of Dave and are ever so supportive of our teachers. But I think that that golden rule thing, it's like treat others the way you want them to treat you type thing is I think what the tone, my takeaway from that. And I'd also encourage the school committee to try on or think about this. And it's something that I have to be very mindful of as superintendent, that when I ask something or how I say it, there's a power dynamic that's at play there, and and I have to be very mindful. I expect that we're all going to ask questions. I ask a lot of questions of our staff, and and it's not. I did not have a takeaway from the letter that we shouldn't be asking questions. I think it was more how we ask our questions, and can we go and treat each other respectfully to make sure that the questions and communication flows, not that parties start retreating. And, that's just my 2 cents on it. I think that, I know that members of the administrative team and some of our staff have been to a visions workshop where, we really try to emphasize try on other perspectives and, understand the power dynamics that, that are at play. And I think that some of that got lost in this, and it's unfortunate because I know that I know that each of you and the teachers were all on the same team, but I think for some watching that meeting, it didn't feel like they were on the same team, and I think because of that, the letter was generated.
I have some comments I'd like to make also. I'm somewhat hesitant because I don't want Sharon to feel that I'm pouring gasoline on the flames. But I do have some concerns about some of your response to the complaints. I mean, the complaints are very specific with regard to you making an argument with regard to the change in our curriculum with regard to the mandatory government class. And that's a pretty specific violation of the Norman Protocol. Also, the other complaint had to do with the tone, the way we treat each other, negative impression of an individual, and I think it's important that people who are hearing this understand that what you said, because I'm hoping that you're going to take my recommendation at the end of this, and I really don't mean, I'd like this to also be part of a learning process and part of a further discussion about how we deal with these norms and protocols. But this is a quote of what you said that night. You said, "I think this is a disgrace, what we have for our social studies listings here because of government. I'm not trying to put down any of the other things we're doing, but we're doing a total disservice. A lot of the things we are teaching are nice to know. Government is a need to know. We did in Harwich have a teacher that actually did a need to know. Kids remember from, decades later. And if we don't have somebody passionate in teaching government, maybe we need to get somebody passionate in teaching government. So that's not ever going to change as far as I'm concerned. I'll be an advocate of this forever." That's very strong language. That's very strong language which violates the restriction that we are not going to renegotiate or rediscuss decisions that we've made as a school committee. And the choice of words really does make a difference. You've raised the issue, you raised the defense, if you will, that if you had been provided with information prior to the meeting, you may not have asked those questions. I don't think that's a legitimate statement to make. I don't think the comments that you made had anything to do with the information that was being presented directly. I'm not sure how having that information in advance would have led to a different result. I also want to address
Could I respond to that
I want to
first?
address a point made by Ms. Ryder, which I think was actually more directed at the complaint against you. The footnote that she reads from the protocols, footnote 2 on the second page, or the first page where we actually talk about anything, which you read to us before. It says, "Some individuals object to this provision because it stifles dissent and disagreement. It is important to note that supporting the official position of the school committee does not preclude principal disagreement or future attempts to change policy, but simply not to undermine the works of the majority's policy of the district." And I think that's what happened here. Any member of this committee, as long as I've been the chair, anybody that wants to make a motion or can make a motion, if a member of if we had voted, if we, as we did, vote on the change in the graduation requirements and the elimination of the government class as a mandatory course, there may be practical considerations why it's a little late after the fact to make another motion, but there's nothing inherent in any of our norms or protocols or any rule of Robert's rules that would prevent a member from, first of all, asking that that topic be put back on the agenda, and then giving everybody notice, therefore they'd like to reconsider that, and then making a motion at the next meeting, when it's on the agenda, to reconsider the vote. That's what they talk about here when they talk about having a principal disagreement and future attempts to change. Not once the vote has been taken, out of the blue, going on a diatribe about how inappropriate it was. And people have forwarded me Facebook notes that you've made similar comments about that government decision. And I'm very concerned about that because I don't look at Facebook very much, but I'm told that a couple of people in the world do. So again, I'm sorry to come on kind of strong. I didn't think I was going to go this far. But I think it's important that you acknowledge that what you said was a specific violation of specific norms and protocols. And I would respectfully request that you specifically apologize for it, not give reasons and excuses as to why you think they were appropriate remarks.
But Brian, you're an attorney, I'm not. If I thought I needed one, I would have had one. You're taking this all out of context. Before that happened, I had asked just what I had mentioned in here about how many times these things were being offered. All of my comments were not about the government wasn't a requirement. They were all about how frequently it was offered as an elective. That's very different than what you're saying.
I'm repeating what you said, and you referred to the government decision twice in the same
Yes,
statement.
but you aren't talking, I mean, if you were the lawyer, you would expand that to say, just like we did with, what Terry was talking about. You have to look at it in context. It wasn't that little statement in isolation. Prior to that came, how many times the whole thing happened because we had not been provided this information. If I had had this information ahead of time, I would have been calling Scott, like I always do, if something comes up, don't I?
A few times.
And so that's what would have happened. But we didn't have the information. And so on the slide, that was the first time we saw the information. And it was the frequency. I was looking for several times. I expected, because of what the principal said, that several times he said that most of the kids would be taking government anyway. And so in order to have that happen, I was looking for the frequency. I hadn't even considered any of this before the meeting. But in that meeting, I looked at that, and when that slide came up there, that was what was disturbing to me, is that there were all these other things offered multiple times, and government was offered 1 year, senior year. That was it. That was the beginning and the end of all of that.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Any further discussion on the topic of norms and protocols or the complaints brought against the 3 members that have been discussed?
Just one more suggestion that if we talk about norms and protocols going forward, I would highly recommend putting these footnotes into our norms and protocols so they're much more specific and have a little bit of a different meaning or more articulated meaning, and would have been beneficial for the teachers to have that much more information with norms. Maybe ours are too basic, because basically what we just did is took our norms and protocols and made an excuse for every single one. Just being objective.
Ms. Schrader.
I think it's a great suggestion to add in the footnotes, or at least some of the language in the footnotes, and just so that you know, the norms and protocols are to be reviewed every year. So after we reorganize, we'll go and talk about them again and change them if we need to make them appropriate. Just so you know.
I know, thank you.
Mr. Russell.
Mr. Chair, at risk of being self-serving, you mentioned the three members of the school committee that were identified as possibly violating the protocol. I was one of them. During the executive session, I presented to our members my rationale and the reason I felt I did not violate it. I think there was a vote, if you would explain to me that.
The results of the executive session?
Correct.
You were requesting that?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that the conclusion of the committee, the executive session was limited to discussing the complaint, if you want to call it that, against Mr. Russell. As I said, he wasn't mentioned specifically in the letter from the teachers, but it was pretty clear. I think you agreed that appeared to be what they were referencing the remarks that you made. We discussed it in executive session, and a motion was made to, actually, would you have the motion handy? I don't want to misstate it.
Mr. Duvall made the motion that there was not a violation of the norms and protocol, that it was a misperception as to the teacher's interpretation of Mr. Russell's comment.
And was that seconded and voted on?
Yes, it was.
What was the vote?
It was unanimous.
Okay. So it was the unanimous decision of the school committee to determine that it was our position that Mr. Russell had not violated the school committee's norms and protocols. Ms. Richardson.
I just had a couple suggestions. One, I would like to have information a week ahead. And also, if we had information about specifically the presentation by the high school teachers ahead of time, they wouldn't have had to take 2 hours to read it to us.
Anything else? Thank you all. Next item on the agenda, if I can find my agenda. Ms. Scott.
May I harp on something very briefly? May
Pardon?
I harp on something briefly?
Sure.
The norms and protocols that we developed, we tried to make them, correct me if I'm wrong, because I believe Ms. Stout and Ms. Ryder were with me on this. We tried to make them more of a friendly tone and not a hammer tone. And I think that we need to be careful when we review them to not make them more of a legalese wording, and including, many of the footnotes, just making sure, I don't know, I guess it's unnecessary at this point because we're going to be reviewing them in about 2 months probably. But I just think that we need to remember that these are not our laws. These are just what we try to do at meetings. And this is how we try to behave at meetings and talk at meetings and treat each other at meetings. So I think it's just a reminder of basic dignity and respect of everybody. So, all right, I'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, strategic plan update. I apologize again for having continued this from a previously really long meeting and bumping you to tonight.
Well, and I apologize that you didn't get this in advance, despite the fact that the first date was March 9th. So you probably would have lost it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Carla Blanchard, Director of Curriculum. And tonight's strategic plan update is brought to you by the Service Learning, if we can.
And the letter A.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so this is Strategic Objective 2, which deals with strengthening parent and community partnerships to support student learning. We're looking at Strategic Initiative 2E, which addresses supporting our educational mission by strengthening civic-minded decision-making and attention to global responsibilities. And we're going to focus on the number 3 of that initiative, which is how we are moving toward building capacity within our schools by supporting staff training in this area. So first of all, a little blurb about what is service learning. And service learning is an instructional practice and an approach that allows students to participate in partnerships with community to address real problems and needs of the community and applying their knowledge and skills to address those needs. It differs from community service in that it's very closely linked to the academic standards and the curriculum of the program. So where community service is a volunteer, where students go into the community and do volunteer work, this is closely related and tied into the curriculum. There are three key components that make service learning. Sometimes they're referred to as three legs of a stool. The first is the academic integrity that I just spoke to, that every project is clearly linked to the local curriculum and addresses the learning standards through the state. And there's a strong emphasis on application of knowledge and skills that are embedded in those standards as students address a project. The second component is the apprentice citizenship component, where students work directly with partnerships in the community and are working on local needs. And the third is student ownership. Many of the projects, depending on student level, are often student generated. They don't have to be, but often students will come up with the problem of practice on their own. They share in the decision-making with the adults, and the adults share in the learning with the students, and also serve as partners and coaches. So we're looking at 2E, number 3, which is building capacity. So this actually, we began last year in January of 2016 in the 15-16 school year. 6 middle school staff attended an off-site 2-day training. They came back and they were so enthusiastic that 4 additional middle school staff said, I want to go, I want to go. So they went off in last May, and were trained the same training, which is a 2-day training, and it's provided by Tracy Harkins, of the KIDS Consortium. KIDS stands for Kids Involved in Doing Service Learning, because we always have to have an acronym. Those 10 staff members created such so much enthusiasm at the middle school that we brought Tracy Harkins to the district and linked it to our all-day in-service in November, where 18 additional staff members participated in the same training. So right now, there are 28 staff members in the middle school representing all departments and grades that are trained in service learning and are able to be train the trainer model, so they can go out and train other folks in the district. In addition, at the high school, we have some select staff who trained in civic education for democracy program offered through the Center for Civic Education. And that's where we get the Project Citizen and the We the People. So going back to the middle school, 28 staff members, we divided them into a humanities team and a STEM team. And each team took a full day of task force work to come up with the following vision statement, and I'll let you take a minute and read that. Okay, and as part of their full-day task force work, they also identified emerging themes to be used to develop interdisciplinary units. And these are some of the themes that they have identified in their existing curriculum. Remember, the really important part of service learning is that it's part of the regular curriculum and their standards. It's just this partnership with the community and solving a real-world problem. Finally, and keeping with those 3 legs of that stool, they had to make sure that they were aligning the skills and knowledge and the standards with their emerging themes and their ideas for curriculum development going forward. So as you can see, the skills and knowledge that they've identified are very consistent with the 21st century skills of creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. So in addition to the work that has been done at the middle school, because they really are the kind of the nucleus of this going forward, and being able to move it into the elementary school in a backward design model and then up to the high school. There are 2 grades in Chatham Elementary School who have developed 2 units on the following: pollinator unit and an aquaculture unit that are service learning in collaboration with those local partnerships. Harwich Elementary School has created some partnerships, and those are in line to be able to begin to build service learning units of study. And then at Monomoy Regional High School, we have Project Citizen in grade 8, the Global Studies program that currently has, I believe, 35 students who have applied to be in that program. And then in grade 12, we have the We the People. So this is just a small example of the partnerships that already exist, and most of these are linked to current learning opportunities that are happening in our middle school, in Monomoy Middle School. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just an example of how many partnerships we've already made, and you know, the opportunity that service learning will have in growing in the district. So the next steps will be to form a service learning council, and that is our strategic objective 1, strategic initiative 1D, number 1. We've identified some teachers and administrators in the district. The principals will reach out to school council members, and then we'll continue that beyond with finding our community members who would like to be part of that council. We've decided that we would really want to provide training for that service learning council, possibly not 2 full days, but a shortened version so that they understand the spirit behind it. We're going to be engaging in summer curriculum writing this summer, starting with that core group of middle school teachers that are just really chomping at the bit to get writing. And then we'll obviously continue our service learning training and unit development at all levels throughout the next year or so, and then work on expanding our partnerships. So I just want to recognize Principal Mark Wilson at the middle school and his staff for really just grabbing this and running with it. Mr. Wilson has some connections through the Center for Civic Engagement, and he's capitalized on those connections, as well as his partnership with Tracy Harkins and her organization. So we're very fortunate to be able to have them come down and work with us in district. And I want to recognize those 28 very enthusiastic teachers who've worked very hard and taken time out of their classrooms to become the experts in the district. And I'd also like to shout out to Mr. John Dixon and his committee for creating the Global Studies program. Mr. Dixon and I met last summer, and he came to me and said, I've got this idea, what do you think? And now we've got 35 applications, and so in a very short period of time, that program has really taken off. So I just wanted to recognize those people, because I get up here and talk about it, but they're doing a lot of the work. So that's the update.
Questions?
I don't have any questions.
I am struck by the partnership list. I mean, that's really impressive that we form partnerships with that many, highly respected organizations on the Cape, and the work that the staff has done. I'm very impressed, and I commend you and your team for doing all that.
Well,
that's
I
great.
appreciate it. It's really the team.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Come back anytime.
I think that was the key time to present anything.
No kidding. Mr. Carpenter, for kindergarten and pre-K update and enrollment. Oh, Ms. Scott.
I'm actually deferring.
Ms. Richardson.
I just wanted to say there will be further strategic plan updates, right? Because there's still a lot to
That's
cover.
part of our strategic plan.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Oldak. I'm the assistant principal at Harwich Elementary, and Dr. Millen and I are here tonight to update you on our kindergarten and preschool enrollment for next year and across the district at both Harwich and Chatham Elementary. During the kindergarten registration process, which was on February 28th and March 1st, the Harwich Elementary administration met with contacted each family and discussed and highlighted the opportunity for intra-district school choice to Chatham Elementary. That has been done in previous years for the last 2 years, but this year we contacted the families as part of the actual registration process, whereas in the past we kind of were bringing those options up more in the summertime as additional families were registering. As part of that process, we had 12 families from Harwich express an interest for intra-district choice to Chatham, and 7 of those families expressed the need for door-to-door busing. And once those families were identified, Dr. Millen took over the process at that point, and
So Sam and Mary had given us the names of all 12 of those families that were interested in the inter-district choice. So I personally reached out, I contacted each one of them and invited them in for a meet and greet and a tour of the school. A lot of the families were from the East Harwich area, a couple from the West Harwich area. And we just chatted, we talked, and we showed around the school. We had a great visit. Some of them brought their children. It was nice to see. So over 3 days, we met with 5 families out of the 12. And then after that point, and this is about a week and a half ago, we had received 5 intra-district applications from families. Not all of them were the ones from the tour. Some of them were historical. So when we say about historical choice is when families have had siblings in our school already as choice students. We take them as priority type of applications. So 3 of them were already historical applications. 2 were new families, 2 of the new families. That's okay.
Okay, the enrollment for next year at Harwich Elementary in kindergarten, that's the top row there. We have no residents, no students from Chatham, 94 Harwich residents. That includes those who are registered currently and 5 that we know are coming. We have 8 out-of-district residents, and that is brings us to a total of 102 at Harwich Elementary. We will be adding on to that number over the summer. We typically get about 6 to 12 new registrants over the summer into next fall, and there is a possibility of 2 or 3 retentions of current kindergarten students. So that's how it looks for kindergarten at Harwich. For our age 3 preschool, we have 0 Chatham residents because those students would be in the integrated preschool at Chatham. We have 21 students in Harwich. That includes the students that are currently in referral and in early intervention that we project will become eligible throughout the school year. We have 0 out-of-district residents, which again is part of the model of the integrated preschool, for a total of 21 students in our 2 sections of in our age 3 preschool. For our age 4 preschool, again, we don't have any out-of-district residents or Chatham residents. We have a total of 19 students at this point in our age 4 program, which also runs a morning and afternoon program. Our 3rd preschool opportunity at Harwich Elementary is a very unique program called Make Way for Kids, which has been in existence for about 30 years in, there we go, in the Harwich community. It is a partially grant-funded, general fund-funded program, and we also receive tuitions. However, this program is for high-needs families. So the families pay on a sliding scale. And we have about 15 students who are served, and 15% of that student population also has to be special needs. So we have a really wonderful model where some of our age 3 and 4 integrated preschool students have the opportunity to round out their day with a full day program and transition. If they're a morning student, they transition to make way in the afternoon, or vice versa. I did want to just mention that our longtime early eye coordinator in the town of Harwich, Francie Joseph, is retiring this year after serving the community for 30 years and for being one of the founders of Make Way for Kids.
So for Chatham Elementary School, you can see on the slide, 29 of the students that were registered were for Chatham residents. 3 of the students that we registered were from Harwich, and those were the historical students. And then we had 2 historical out-of-district, inter-district choice students that also are on our list. So we have a total of 34 kindergarten students registered at this time. During the summer, we pick up typically about 1 to 2 students. We don't have as large of an influx. We have a larger influx of students in the upper grades at Chatham than we do at the primary level. So we're not anticipating that many move-ins from Chatham. We just don't get them historically at that lower level. And then for our pre-K numbers, we look at our numbers a little bit differently. Sorry, it just keeps going. But we have 9 students right now ready to be registered for age 3. That we have a certain amount of students in referral and also on EI lists also. So that number by the end of our year is anticipated to be upward close to 20 with a peer 51% of the peer model. So that number is going to jump significantly by the end of the year. Some of those students will turn 4 over the year, so we will move some of those students into that bottom category where we have 9 age 4 students, and they will rise to about 14 and by the end of the year. So with each sections, our biggest concern was obviously the kindergarten sizes. I mean, the population of the students and students we had in each of the respective elementary schools. We have 8 sections of kindergarten across the 2 elementary schools, so we needed to determine the appropriate number of sections for each school with equitable class sizes. If you look at the next slide, we looked at, and basically we sat down with the numbers is what it looks like. So right now we currently have 5 sections at Harwich Elementary School and 3 sections at Chatham Elementary School. So if we kept that configuration, the class sizes between the 2 were about 2 to 1. So 20.4, I don't know how we split a child by 4/10, but students in a class. And then at Chatham Elementary School, it would have meant 11.3 students per class. So if we look at it a little more broadly as a Monomoy district and we transition one section over to Harwich to absorb the numbers that they had there, keep the 2 sections at Chatham Elementary School, it made an equitable distribution of the 2 class sizes. So that would mean that all Harwich students, or all classes in Harwich and all classes in Chatham at this time would be 17 students per class. So, and if you look at how it breaks down for the preschools as well, you can see the equitable distribution between Harwich and Chatham because they have 2 classes, a morning and afternoon session of age 3 over at Harwich. We only have a morning section, and then at Harwich they have the morning and afternoon of age 4, and then the Make Way for Kids is a full day sections. So the school choice acceptances and the staffing transfers have been made. All the staff has been notified. School choice letters are on their way to go out, and this has provided an equitable distribution between the elementary schools. And these are just some, Superintendent Carpenter added this slide, but it gives you the historical idea of what this has looked like over the last few years. There is also on the right-hand side the information by contract. We are required by contract if class sizes go above 18 to provide a full-time aide in each one of the classrooms. We have made the decision to provide that full-time aide this year, even though we're sitting at 17 across the district. We know that that will jump more than likely, at least 18 in most, or if not all of the classrooms. And these are the efforts that we've done over the years for the HES families and CES families.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Ryder?
School choice acceptances and staffing transfers have been made. So you, just to clarify, you're saying that one staff member has been transferred as of the fall over to Harwich from Chatham?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Ms. Stout?
My only comment is I think it was so wise of you to keep that full-time aide at that level. I've been a kindergarten teacher for several years. Great, thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Howard's question.
Yep.
It makes sense to me. So there would be 2 sections remaining, K, Chatham, and
6 in Harwich.
6. And the assumption, obviously, is that even as large as the school is, it can accommodate another section with a room.
Yes, yes.
Yep, good. Excellent.
A little bit of a domino effect that we're working that out.
Yep.
Anybody else? Yeah, when you speak of the domino effect, I assume you're referring to the fact that that bubble of students will then have to go to first grade, second grade, third grade.
We actually have 6 sections in those, in those third grade levels.
Oh, you do?
Already, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thanks very much. Regional agreement, deja vu.
So before I just jump into the regional agreement, I'll try to segue into this. One of the things that we were trying to do with, we'll call it voluntary redistricting, and trying to, we have for the last 3 years been trying to get Harwich families to help support keeping Chatham Elementary School at 3 sections and trying to shrink Harwich Elementary School down to 5 sections. So that's what we've been trying to accomplish. So the nice stable state for the district, given the number of students that we have at the primary grade levels, is 8 sections in the buildings. There is a challenge, though, for Harwich Elementary. If we continue 6 sections per grade level, there has never been room at Harwich Elementary to have 6 sections of kindergarten, first, second, and third, and fourth. And what historically has happened is that in 4th grade, there's 5 sections because that's all the space there is in the building, which then creates a set of large classes when you get up to 4th grade. So there is something that that looms out there where there's going to be, if we keep 6 sections at Harwich, there will be a scenario where 4th grade will be large like it was when the district first came together. I think long term, if you kind of think of what we're doing here to stabilize the class sizes at kindergarten at 17, we will then, if we play this forward a year, next year we'll have 2 first grade sections at Chatham Elementary and more than likely 2 kindergarten sections, and then the following year, 2 kindergarten, 2 first grade, 2 second grade, and so on, so that Chatham Elementary will continue to shrink to 2 sections per grade level, and Harwich Elementary will grow to 6 sections per grade level. And I think something that the school committee and our communities are going to need to wrestle with is that distribution, sort of 6 sections in an elementary school per grade level and 2 sections at the other elementary school per grade level, in the best interest of teaching and learning and for kids. And I think I think there are some that might say, hey, if there's one elementary school that'll be just sort of smaller and more intimate. But I think for some parents, they might look at it and say, yeah, but when the kids head out onto the playground, there might be not a large enough peer group to interact with. On the other side, there may be families in Harwich that are going to be looking at this, that, you know, having one of the largest elementary schools on Cape Cod, is that really what we need? You have sort of the other dynamic playing out. So I think that's one of the things that this committee and our communities are going to need to wrestle with. And hence we have, you know, the regional agreement and this notion of, should we, you know, at some point look towards towards having some way that if there is inequity in class size, or potentially maybe we have to look at it, it's that you could have equitable class sizes, but you have the, you know, I guess the appropriate sized buildings. You know, do you have, you know, does Chatham Elementary become too small, so to speak, and is Harwich Elementary becoming too large in terms of total student populations within the buildings? So, you know, so based on some wording that School Committee Member Russell provided, the lawyer looked at, and I think you'll see on page 5, at the top of the page in red, the number 4. The lawyer suggested that that having it read something to the extent that students may be reassigned to schools outside of their respective towns for the purposes of maintaining equitable student-teacher ratios across the district's elementary schools. The reassignment of students for this purpose will be initiated by the recommendation of the committee, by the district superintendent, and is subject to approval by majority vote of the school committee. I'll point out, you know, and I think while I think the wording and the intent was good when we were going into this, you know, that was before we started to go and put together kindergarten class sizes, because I would say from the presentation that that Dr. Millen and Ms. Oldak provided, class size is equitable, you know, but I think what starts to become into question is, what's the right number of kids to actually have in an elementary school? Can an elementary school get too small for the good of kids, and can an elementary school be too big for the good of the kids? So I appreciate, and in fact, I initially, when I was talking with people, was suggesting that we should be looking at equitable class sizes, but I think we can stabilize class size in moving a kindergarten teacher. I don't know if that's the right answer long-term for an elementary school size issue. So I'll leave it to this group to discuss. Ms. Stowe.
Well, this might be something that could be done either with teachers or school committee or any group of people, because I don't know whether there's other ideas, like, for instance, 4th grade, would it fit at the middle school? Or, you know, I'm not suggesting any of these things. I'm just saying that it might be a time for brainstorming. Trying to fix Chatham Elementary School has been a problem forever, you know, trying to get that number of kids there. And I'm not against it, but I just don't know how well it will be received by Harwich.
Ms. Ryder. Or by Chatham.
Or by Chatham.
Right. I think I would like to hear from the elementary school staff whom it would affect if they're transferred between Chatham and Harwich, how they feel about that as opposed to reassignment of kids from Harwich to Chatham as a different way of maintaining the ratio. I would like to get that input. And I also would like to hear from people, especially in East Harwich, that might potentially be affected by reassignment. You know, do they feel one way is better than another? Would it really bother one of the staff members in the elementary school in Chatham, for example, to be reassigned to Harwich? You know, how much would it bother them as opposed to the other option? I think that might be good input to get before we go any further. I'm not sure how, but.
Well, I would point out that this is the idea of amending the regional agreement to allow the school committee to do this reassignment would have to be approved by the town meetings in both towns. So there will be a lot of input before, you're talking about, we get input before we suggest it, but even
Right.
then, there'll be a tremendous amount of input subsequent to that as well. And my thought on the proposal is, it still requires the approval of the committee. It doesn't give the superintendent the power to do it on a whim, which I think is a strong protection, because we obviously do seek the input as often as possible from the community. Mr. Russell.
Taking a page out of Sharon's suggestion, I think it makes sense. I'm trying to think, the last couple of years, we've had a leadership team made up of, in this case, as Karen said, X number of volunteers from Chatham Elementary, Howard Elementary, the principals from the 2 elementary schools, and to spend a certain number of time this summer coming up with options that would be long range, not like calling more children in May, would you like to join us, because we have. That's a short term. It looks like we've solved the short term solution. What package could be brought forward via our superintendent that would reflect this leadership team directly impacted, like option 1, option A, option B, option C, to allow us to be able to see all 3 of those or 2 of those for, say, the year after, the year next to make it, because there are a couple of ways you could skin this cat, but there is a consequence. So that's my suggestion.
We need to have a lottery to get into Chatham Elementary School.
Make it interesting.
People think they're winning an award.
That's one of the options.
Ms. Ryder.
May I ask a question related to the presentation that I meant to ask? There was something in there about saying 7 families indicated they would need to be bused door to door. Was that an option offered for them so that the Harwich child could come to Chatham, or is that?
Mr. Carpenter would like to address that.
Sorry, okay, fine. Whoever can address that. I was just asking for clarification on that.
So my understanding is when the Harwich families were spoken to, they were asked, would you need transportation, or could you provide it on your own? For us, in terms of trying to go and make a decision as to what to do, because we have a lot of families that are wanting clarity on where is our child going to be next year, and the 7 for that purpose was rather moot. That the 7 students, even if they all were in a place that we could bus them, those 7 students alone wouldn't shift. It wouldn't balance the class sizes for us. So the other challenge that we have is that the 7 students aren't in one handy, they're right where a bus could pick them up. We would have to route a bus all over town, and still we would be left with an inequitable distribution in class size.
Ms. Ryder.
But it is a good indication that is an important factor for any family considering having their child come to Chatham when they live in Harwich. The busing is an important factor that we need to include in our discussion. That's a really good indicator right there. The 7 families said, well, if there were busing door to door, we would do it, but there isn't, so we're not. And as you said, it is a moot point, I understand. It wouldn't have solved the problem, but just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, I agree. Mr. Duval, I'm sorry, Mr. Carpenter.
Was it Tuesday? Brian and I were at a Harwich budget presentation.
Voter information.
Yeah, the voter information, the annual voter information taping. And one of the long-term residents of Harwich mentioned that there was this draw for Chatham Public Schools for Harwich families, that Chatham Public Schools had much smaller class sizes than Harwich Public Schools, and that was a draw. And I had commented that one of the challenges that I have is if I'm equalizing class sizes between Harwich and Chatham. The draw that was there, isn't so great, and that's why I think the families that said yes and that signed up right away, they had older siblings who had positive experiences at Chatham Elementary School and said, yeah, that's where we're going to go. And the families that were less inclined to follow up and do the tours, we're hoping that we could provide door-to-door busing, but I think we should keep in mind that alone's not going to balance out the class sizes and allow us to get to a 5-3 ratio. So that's a challenge that we've got to wrestle with. Is that when we've got a class size of 17 in both buildings, this draw for smaller class size has gone.
I just want, I made the joke about having a lottery, but you're reminding me that back before we regionalized, a significant portion of Chatham Elementary School students came from Harwich. As you say, it was considered, those parents had no problem driving their kids over to Chatham when it was not a region and they had to transport for that reason. As we're thinking outside the box, if we were to decide as a school committee to maintain a slightly smaller student population in Chatham, then there'd be more of a draw again, like there was before, and might be able to keep the numbers more in balance if we allowed it to be slightly smaller. Oh boy. Mr. Russell.
That's an option, but I think you need to balance the fact that how you define slightly smaller.
Yeah.
If it ended up being Harwich Elementary K4 with about 18 to 20 kids in it, and slightly smaller to get more of a draw for Chatham was 12 and 13, you'd have a staff issue.
Well, that's a big difference, yeah.
So, and that is not for me to say slightly small. It's not. I don't know if you're looking at 1 or 2, which year by year, that I don't see as a big problem. But if in fact you had to go back the other way, that there'd be such a 5 or 6 member class increase in each first grade, second, third, there'd be an issue, which I would fully appreciate that the Harwich staff would very correctly raise questions about that.
Good point. Ms. Ryder.
Just to make a point that I've spoken to elementary school parents from Harwich, and the small class size is not the only draw. There are other reasons. Bum, bum, bum. What?
Would you like to share with us?
Okay.
Do you have enough for everyone?
You just open that up.
All right. Let's see. A couple of them, and I guess these were the main two, were that it's a whole different culture, and it's a smaller school. I mean, overall, it's a smaller school that is appealing to some parents. And, they're not exactly the same culture from one school to the other, and they never will be, which is fine. But for some parents, they like the Chatham culture at Chatham Elementary more than the Harwich culture at Harwich Elementary.
I wonder how much of that is historical reputation more than reality in terms of the culture, but
that I can't
who knows?
Judge.
That's in the beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, so before the districts came together, and even in the first year when I got here, class sizes at Harwich Elementary were 18, 19, 20, and my daughter was in a class size of 14, which was sort of the norm. And that discrepancy, I know in the first years was very noticeable to our staff, and I think Terry knows full well. You have too many years where that goes on. It becomes an understandable union issue on that. Why is there an inequity between the two school buildings? I also think that Sharon's idea to bring, I think, a representative group of the community together and wrestle with this, and I think to start doing that this summer and into the fall is a good thing. I think that it gives us a chance to go and rethink what the appropriate elementary model should be for our district. So, for example, One of the things that, that our crack team of teachers and administrators thought that might be a good thing is let's have all of the early childhood sections together, both Harwich and Chatham. And it'd be a great collaborative way to bring those children and families together. The regional agreement doesn't allow us to go and have the kids from Harwich go over to Chatham or Chatham go over to Harwich. And even if they did, if Harwich is at 6 sections, there's not enough room in the end to have that happen in Harwich. And, and if we have them all come over to Chatham, then we're making, we would make Chatham then be only 2 sections per grade level for first, second, third, fourth, and so on. And, so I think you have that type of model that, that a committee could look at. There are other committees that have sort of upper and lower grade elementary schools that, but again, our regional agreement would not allow a pre-K1 or pre-KK1 type schools, 2, 3, 4. And again, I'm not advocating for one over the other. I think that's something, as I said, this is an issue the community and committee need to wrestle with, and it needs to be a number of voices.
I'm going to request that, this is obviously something that is going to have to be discussed a great deal into the future and get a lot of input and a lot of consideration by the school committee. In the interest of time, would the committee be all right if we went on to the next agenda item?
Yes.
Just one really quick, just one quick thing. Katie Isernial and I had a conversation with a vendor that we'll likely engage with that has not only a package that does bus routing software that would be good for us to have when we next go out to bid for our transportation, but that same software allows us to use it as a tool to visualize where the children are in a geographic map. When you ask, well, where are those 7 families? I can sit down with Sam Hine and he'll say, well, these are over in West Harwich and these are, but I don't have a way to just kind of project it up. And I think that's, as we go through this type of dialogue, we're going to need to have some tool that we can look at and say, okay, what if? And so that's a piece of software that we've I've asked the business manager to figure out some way to go and make it happen. So
We can find all the cul-de-sacs. The cul-de-sacs.
That's it. Sorry.
Bring them to the end.
All right, memorial policy. We have a brief summary from the policy subcommittee. I know that
Brief summary would be that the changes that Ms. Ryder suggested 2 meetings ago, whenever
seems like
ago,
only yesterday.
Those are reflected in the policy that were, what she presented, they're in this policy. I lost my train of thought, sorry.
And so the one that was provided to all the members of the committee most recently by email and also is in tonight's package is the proposed final draft from the policy subcommittee.
Which is very similar to the one that we read with a couple of minor edits that she proposed.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I went back and made the changes. I had given apparently the wrong copy last time, so I made those small changes, and yes, this is the final draft.
Is there a motion?
I would move that we accept the most recent draft of the memorials policy dated, I don't have it, mine says 3/31.
Yes.
Dated 3/31/17.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's a unanimous vote. Next up, superintendent evaluation. We also have a
So
subcommittee
at the
report on
last,
that.
sorry, I thought you were
Scott.
looking at me, so I just started talking, move things along. At the last meeting, Mr. Carpenter presented the proposed goals to be a part of his evaluation. So what the subcommittee would be asking is to approve the goals that he presented. And just to remind the committee that the packet that we were given with his goals, that is not all we're doing. That's just his goals are the goals that we worked with him to provide as his performance goals. The full packet is including the different standards as well. And this would be evaluating him over the entire course of the 2016-2017 school year, not just starting now.
So what you're seeking then would be approval just of the limited, the goals themselves?
The superintendent's performance goals, which would go in this nice small page as a part of the larger evaluation packet.
Is there a motion? We're going to discuss it, absolutely. Is there a motion to approve them?
I would move that we approve the superintendent's Monomoy Regional School District's goals for 2016-2017.
Second.
Discussion, Ms. Ryder.
Just to be clear, these goals are being presented for the 2016-2017 school year, which ends in the end of June, and they're being presented as of 2 weeks ago. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It's my understanding that the evaluation system that is used for all levels of educators. Do we have an estimate of how many staff members at lower levels, say, an estimate of how many teachers provide their goals for the 2016-2017 year in April?
By contract, we have,
Mr. Governor.
we have goals conferences that are required, and we meet with our staff in, I believe, October, before October, a date in October.
Ms. Scott.
So therefore, I would say that we fell short of our duties to establish a goals meeting in the fall. And we're trying to rectify that situation by having a discussion about superintendent's goals that while they have been presented 2 weeks ago, they are not starting 2 weeks ago. Many of these goals have to do with the strategic plan, which has been a year-long endeavor.
Ms. Ryder.
It is not the responsibility of whoever you're referring to as we to ask for a goals meeting. All of us have been aware since September, October, that these goals should have been presented. In fact, I sent an email to Mr. Whittegren in October asking where these goals were and when we would receive them from the superintendent. I think that if all the other educators are required to have and present their goals in October, that the superintendent should be held to the same standard to have and present the goals in October.
Mr. Russell.
In an attempt for harmony on this issue, I would make two suggestions. The second one first, that at some point this evening we have Mr. Carpenter read these goals to allow us to get an explanation from him as to what they were. The point about harmony, Karen, you're right. As I said 2 weeks ago, there is no other solution that the subcommittee, the four of us, Donna, Jackie, Nancy, and myself, could come up with that would get us retroactively back on track. So either we, next time, assure ourselves through some calendar date, meaning in August or July, that we start right off the bat to correct our own, all of our errors, or whoever we wish to blame. But in the sense of getting us started on, many of these are retroactive to this past September, and others go right through till June. So in that sake, I would suggest we either move the question and have a vote to see if we accept these goals and move on to the next step.
Ms. Stout.
I think maybe how to solve this for the future is to make a motion now to have the superintendent present our goals to us by the end of October, and so we'll move it to, at least in the future. I don't know what to do about now.
Ms. Richardson.
I would agree with Terry on a couple of points that, Karen, you are right, and B, we are trying to go forward. I know as a new school committee member, a year ago, I was handed the goals and asked to evaluate them. And at that time, I had no information, I mean, I had...
Last year's goals.
Last year's goals,
Right.
yes, last year, a year ago. So maybe for new people, it would make sense to start the cycle now, but it was a mistake to do that.
Further discussion, Ms. Ryder?
What I'm hearing is that certain members of the school committee are taking responsibility for a mistake that was made, that I don't think it was a mistake of the school committee, because the school committee came up with goals in October. And it follows that the superintendent's goals, fall in line with the school committee goals. And generally, it's right after that, and it's in that October timeframe. So I just don't really understand.
Further discussion, Ms. Scott? Mr. Duval?
Move to question.
I think we just have one more comment. Would you mind if we let Ms. Stout get the last word?
I was going to make a motion.
Well, we've already got a motion on the
Motion's
table.
been made.
I'll make it afterwards.
No, the motion's been made and seconded, and
No, I
this
think
is a
she has no
discussion.
I'll have it one afterwards, you're right. I lost track.
All right, motion has been made to approve the goals as presented by the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
That would be one opposed. Ms. Ryder? Ms. Stout?
I move that for next year, the superintendent will provide us with his goals by the end of October. Do we have a second?
Second.
You're not allowed to make a second.
Well played.
Very good.
I did have to look forward.
Was there an actual second from a school committee member?
No, I'll second it.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with September rather than October, but
Yeah.
it gets us.
No
How
later
about
than?
no. Discussion. All those in favor?
I just have a
I'm
question.
sorry, Ms. Ryder.
Looking at the educator evaluation, I don't have it in front of me. I think you're pretty familiar with it, Nancy, yes? As well as I am? I mean,
Off
I've
the
looked
top
at
of
it a
my
lot.
head, I don't know if I could answer a question.
Do we need to have a vote on this?
No, not necessarily, because we can make a vote when the actual term comes up, another school year, but there's not, it's a legitimate motion, it's been seconded.
Mr. Chair, I think we do, Karen, because we need a preliminary vote to accept these goals as the measurable topics for the superintendent for this year.
Well, I don't
We
think
already
that
did
was the
that.
question.
No, we did that.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you're
Then
talking
I'm
about
losing.
Sharon's motion?
Sharon's.
Oh, that.
I think Sharon's motion would be to make
Premature.
it feel better that we got something on the books.
We have something concrete.
Then we don't need to have a motion.
Any further discussion? There's a motion that's been seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous vote.
Abstain.
You get the motion?
I'd like to see a show of hands, who voted aye and who voted no.
This motion is to approve the superintendent creating these
No.
goals by October?
No. It's
For October.
September?
And these are the
It could be
2017-2018 goals.
Yes.
Before the end of October, yes? Is what I,
Sharon made the motion.
Sharon, what's your
Didn't you
motion?
say October?
I
Sharon,
said,
please amend your
yes,
motion.
October. I mean, I'm open to something, I just want to get something down there so we don't have to think about next year.
So the motion was to require the superintendent to provide his goals for the next school year,
2017-18.
17-18, by October of 2017.
To the superintendent evaluation subcommittee.
Right. Which
Can we
was,
amend that?
I'd
all
second
of
that
us.
if it needed to be.
I think it was voted on unanimously.
No, I abstained.
You did? Oh, I didn't hear you. On the
This is
second
why
one?
I'd like
On
to
the
see
second
it.
one.
It was pretty loud.
I'd like to.
Yes.
I'm deaf as a haddock.
Why don't we just show
It's
of
10
hands?
minutes to 10.
All those in favor, aye?
I think we voted on it, there was one abstention. That is, Ms. Ryder, that is my determination. Next on the agenda, subcommittee reports. I know, wellness policy.
I'll do my last one and then we'll be done. We're meeting, we are in progress. It should be finished sooner than later because we have a timeline that needs to be accomplished. So it is just, this is merely a very brief update that we are still working on it.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Finance committee, finance subcommittee report, Mr. Duval.
The Finance Subcommittee met yesterday to review 2 items. First item was the IRS audit that took place reviewing the calendar years 2014-2015. The reason for the audit was the increased activity by the district. This was based on comparing 2013, which we were only in existence 6 months, to 2014, which was a full year, and that set up a red flag. The audit took place between October 16th and March of 2017. From the audit, we were being assessed additional back pay withholding tax of $10,113.65 and a penalty of $5,200 for late 1099s. I was in the meeting when the auditor did their review with us, and some of her comments was that it was a very clean audit. The items that she found are very common issues when she does audits in school systems. It's something that happens across the board. She was impressed at how quickly Katie and her staff responded to the request for information, which is one of the reasons the audit took such a short period of time. And that she is recommending that there is no need for a follow-up audit, so, which is impressive in itself. The second item that was discussed was the use of an additional $38,000 plus minus of excess and deficiency funds to offset the assessment for this year's budget. Scott has reviewed this with us a couple times during the last school committee meetings. This is coming out at the request of the Harwich Board of Selectmen, and there was a vote of 3-1 to recommend the use of the E&D funds. So concluded our meeting.
Any discussion or questions for Mr. Duval? So we're probably going to need to have a vote with regard to the Harwich assessment at our next meeting.
Right, just before town meeting.
Before town meeting, right? Which is pretty much our next meeting.
Moving on.
So, thank you very much. Superintendent's report, Mr. Carpenter. In 10 minutes or less.
5 minutes or less. Just first, to put some closure to some things. Last Tuesday, Principal Burkhead, Athletic Director Gilmet, and myself went to the Fisher family's residence to present to them Jordan's number 23 jersey that had the J Fish patch that we had made for him, or to commemorate him as the basketball team went into the postseason. And it was a really good conversation, and it was just nice to, I appreciate also the help from my staff to go and put it into a nice frame to share with the family, and they were very appreciative. Second, I would like to invite those on the committee and those watching to come see a screening of the movie Most Likely to Succeed, which is based on a great book. It's a good short read, but I'd encourage folks to to look at the book and come see the movie. It's going to be next Friday, 9 a.m. at the Chatham Orpheum, so it's during the vacation week. Next, we have, there will be a building committee meeting April 24th at 5:30. Knock on wood, we'll be able to close out the project. There is only one air handler unit that is still, that they still need to go and program appropriately. That work's going to be done over this break, and if all goes well, hopefully they can demonstrate that the system's up and running and fine. So we'll be bringing the whole building committee together and with any luck, we'll be able to close things out. By our next committee meeting, I anticipate that the district review that the DSE, when they came here in November, should be publicly available. I have received a draft review from the DESE. I have given them feedback. They've incorporated the feedback, so we've been going back and forth on the draft. So as I said, I anticipate that it would be public and by our next committee meeting, and if it is, then I can go and present the draft because it would then be public, or present the final report because it then would be public. On Wednesday evening, April 26, 6:30 p.m., our peer leaders will be presenting the findings of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. I've been meeting with the peer leaders and helping them. They have the slide deck that I've put together, and they're going to be ready to go present that to their peers in the community. And last on my list of non sequiturs for you, in your packet, there's some information on school climate surveys. I know that both on the MASC listserv and also on the MTA listserv, there were concerns about the school climate surveys. So there has long been on 8th and 10th grade some climate-related questions as to students' classrooms experiences. The state is really interested in getting a feel for social-emotional learning. It's a big push at the state level, as in our district. And I want to emphasize that I think assessing social-emotional learning is important. I'm not really sure that the state tool is ready yet, so the decision that the administrative team has made is that we will not be partaking in this state MCAS social-emotional learning, but we will be using the Endicott survey as part of the NEASC reaccreditation. It's a survey that's age appropriate from 6th grade to 12th grade, so we'll be looking to use that survey at the 6th to 12th grade levels. I think it says 6 and then looking for what's grade appropriate for the lower grades. So we've talked about even modifying the Endicott to accommodate the students. Clearly, the Endicott survey at the lower grade levels would be wholly appropriate for the staff and for parents. So it's a survey that isn't just of students. It's surveying staff. It's surveying parents. It's surveying the students. So you get a broad feeling for the climate of a school.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Ms. Ryder.
I just wanted to say, to express my appreciation for the decision not to answer the questions on the survey about school climate. As I read actually read all of the emails that came through on the listserv, the MASC listserv, the traffic, and I had serious reservations about having our children answer these questions, so I wanted to thank you and the administration for making that decision. That's all.
Thank you. One more thing to do, declaration of surplus equipment. Nancy Scott.
Less than a minute.
What?
Less than a minute.
Well, I move to declare surplus
5
from
seconds,
Harwich
man. Tell her
Elementary
to do it
School,
less
paper
than a minute.
cutter, a tire swing, a floor burnisher, a spreader, another spreader, and 16 office chairs.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. I will now recognize someone to make a motion to go into executive session. No, I do not recognize. I'll recognize somebody to
Turn off the lights.
make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. If you're opposed, you can turn the lights back on.
The warrants have to be done.
Oh, yes.
In the
Aye,
dark?
warrants.
Come on.
No arrests.
It's Wednesday. It's the Wednesday following vacation.
Okay.